It is my pleasure to welcome to the podium Monsignor Michael Stewart to lead us in prayer. Please stand.
Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Almighty and ever-provident God, we, your sons and daughters, rejoice in your solicitude towards us, and graciously thank you for every grace and favor you have bestowed upon us. We thank you for our being in the impress of your likeness upon us. We thank you for making us partakers in your divine wisdom and the ability to think, to choose, and to generate knowledge. Most of all, we thank you for gifting us with faith with which we are able to assent to those truths about you that our finiteness does not allow. We pray to this evening that as we honor, celebrate, and reflect on the work and influence of one of our illustrious sons, Oscar Allen, that you may grant us further insight into our own personhood and giftedness, and so attain to a more profound understanding and appreciation of the Word become flesh. Grant all this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever.
Please remain standing for the national anthem of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, played this evening by Mr. Rodney Small. Please be seated. Thank you very much, Mr. Small. I wish to welcome you to this evening's activity, this memorial lecture in honor of our dear brother Brother Oscar Allen. But before I do that, I wish to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Minister the Honorable Saboto Caesar, Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries, etc., and Member of Parliament for the South Central Windward constituency. Mrs. Deborah Dalrymple, Head of the Open Campus. Dr. Adrian Fraser, former Head of the Open Campus. Reverend Patrick Perrin, our guest speaker for this evening. Friends of Oscar Allen all. Particularly, I want to single out our clergy, Monsignor Mike, the Reverend Silbert Prescott, who is visiting from the Grenada Circuit of the Methodist Church, Deacon Aline of the Anglican community, friends, members of the media, members of the family of Brother Oscar Allen, members of the university community, and persons who are joining us via Nice Radio. We are streaming live, and in case you want to bounce a note to your relatives overseas, if you log into YouTube, it's Oscar Allen Lecture, or Oscar Allen 2018 rather. You'll find that somewhere in cyberspace in YouTube, so you could bounce that link to your friends overseas. It's my pleasure to formally welcome you to this evening's ceremony and activity. My head of the Open Campus, my colleague and head of the Open Campus, Mrs. Deborah Dalrymple. Please welcome her.
Honorable Saboto Caesar, Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries, and Member of Parliament for the South Central Windward constituency, Dr. Adrian Fraser, former Head of the Open Campus, Reverend Patrick Perrin, members of the clergy, friends of Oscar Allen, members of the media, members of the University of the West Indies Open Campus, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good evening. I would especially like to welcome our guest speaker, Reverend Patrick Perrin, who is a pastor of the St. John's United Methodist Church of Elmont, Valley Stream, New York. Reverend Perrin will be more formally introduced shortly, but permit me to also welcome him as an alumnus of the University of the West Indies. Tonight, we would listen to our esteemed colleague as he speaks to us on Oscar Allen, the man, his work, and his influence. At the Open Campus, we represent the UWI at the community level, and indeed, we are encouraged to embark on community development projects as part of our outreach efforts. We consider the lecture series, the literary fair, which includes exhibitions of books and visual arts and craft, the children's village, poetry evenings, and so on, all part of our community development and community education effort. As you may be aware, over the years, the UWI Open Campus St. Vincent has commemorated emancipation from slavery with a lecture or panel discussion. And so, when we were approached by the Friends of Oscar Allen to partner with them in presenting a lecture in his name, we readily agreed. At the Open Campus, we are encouraged to rebrand our lectures as memorial lectures. In this way, we acknowledge the contribution of members of our own community to the development of our people. What better way to bring these two concepts together than with the rebranding of our Emancipation Lecture as the Oscar Allen Memorial Emancipation Lecture. I may not have known Mr. Oscar Allen as well or as intimately as many of you in this hall, but I had a few interactions with him myself. Once, while I worked in the NGO sector, I saw him online at one of the banks. I knew who he was, although I know he did not seek fame, and had met some of his colleagues who had told me about him, such as Earlene Hall and Jethro Green. We had a very long discussion as the line inched his way about Marion House's role in community development, because he felt we should do more than what we were doing at the time, you know. And of course, we spoke about Diamondites, about Diamond Village, and what it meant to be a country girl. I had to convince him that I was indeed a country girl. Well, a Leeward girl anyway. I don't know if he even remembered this random person engaging him in a conversation. I'm sure you would agree that Oscar Allen and community development and emancipation of self are not far removed from each other. I met him again after I took up my current post at the UWI Open Campus. We had a brief and profound conversation then, and it had quite an impact on me and reinforced my resolve to try my best to do a good job at the post. I'm sure that we would all leave this lecture uplifted by hearing about Oscar the man and appreciating even more his contribution to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Thank you.
Before Rodney comes back to delight our hearts with that beautiful instrument, I also want to welcome, or especially welcome, Reverend Costello, who is a retired Methodist minister serving in the Georgetown Monk Oak Circuit. If I'm not mistaken, you also served in the United Methodist Church in the United States. I also wish to acknowledge Brother Monty Moore, prominent Methodist and supporter of the university. And from St. Kitts, Yuloma, Oscar's niece in the back, thank you for coming. And I know other family members in the United States and around the region are tuning into the live stream, so we welcome you. And those of you listening and perhaps viewing on Nice Radio, we welcome you as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rodney Small. Thank you very much, Rodney. Please, I know you could do much better than that. Please give him another round of applause. Thank you very much. And if you see Rodney leaving, he has another engagement around this time, and so we want to say thank you very much, Rodney, for your contribution to tonight's activity. We move along with our program, and I now wish to invite a member of the planning committee, a Diamondite, a strong black woman, and many more. I wish to invite now to the podium Sister Safia Horn-Beek, Mrs. Please welcome her to give us some introductory remarks.
Minister Saluta Caesar, Minister of Agriculture, Member of Parliament for South Central Windward, Mrs. Deborah Dalrymple, Head of the Open Campus, UWI, Dr. Adrian Fraser, former Head of the Open Campus, UWI, Reverend Patrick Perrin, guest speaker for tonight's lecture, members of the clergy, family, friends, invited guests, the media, ladies and gentlemen, I bid you good night. Tonight's lecture honors the life and work of Oscar Allen. As we, the friends of Oscar Allen, gathered after his passing to reflect and celebrate his life, we recognize there isn't a more fitting manner in which to honor him, but to continue his work and to ensure his legacy lives on, to share knowledge and experiences for our enrichment. Just before his passing, he communicated to a few of us proposing to launch and sustain a program of intra- and inter-community activities that include, but not limited to, debate, public speaking, drama, sound, and required research, presentation, proposal making, and community visions. It was intended to host speakers and events that would normally not visit rural areas such as Diamond, where he spent most of his life. This gave the impetus for consideration of a commemorative initiatives, and this lecture is the first such initiative recognizing his life and work. These initiatives aim to bring fruition to what he envisioned as our people, our contribution to society. He was remarkably blessed with a quiet and firm revolutionary consciousness and commitment, the fruit and accumulation to which his moral and material spirituality struggles led in the person he was. His versatility was so great that for years to come, this lecture would encompass a number of areas that he covered in his work and life. Areas that include development, gender, youth, political economy, religion, history, among others. This lecture is only the beginning. As we recognize the work and life of Mr. Allen, we pledge to publish his work and his writing starting next year, and this would include a compendium of his columns, lectures, poems, research pieces. As we know, he wrote extensively on varying issues and through different mediums. We are hopeful to have this first publication by this time next year. While this lecture honors the contribution and legacy of Mr. Allen, Mr. Oscar Allen, reflect on his work and his influence. We thank the UWI Open Campus for embracing our idea and partnering with us in this initiative. I wish to extend, again, on behalf of the Friends of Oscar Allen, welcome and thank you for being here and celebrating with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Safia, for those kind words. And of course, we could be here all night because there are so many things to say. But of course, this is just the beginning, and we anticipate that it will only get better. It's a pleasure now to invite Brother Simeon Green, who is another member of the Planning Committee, Friends of Oscar, another national treasure from Diamond, from that part of the island. Simeon will now give us a citation, and then we will invite the group from Diamond to lead us in a short medley. Then we will have the introduction of our guest speaker. So, Brother Simeon, please welcome him.
Thank you, Brother Rodney, and good night. Pleasure for me to be here. We from Diamond, we are sorry that we are late, but as you see, we came with a full bus load, but we had problems along the way and rain, and to get the bus to maneuver and so on in the area. But we are here. Mr. Oscar Allen, the 9th child of Mr. and Mrs. George Newton Allen, was born at Connery, St. Vincent and the Grenadines on the 1st of June, 1942. He received part of his early childhood education at the Connery Roman Catholic School in the early 1950s, before moving to Kingstown, where he continued his primary school education at the Kingstown Methodist School. In 1954, he entered the Boys' Grammar School, only to be greeted with the name Little Turk. Since in no way his size and toughness, particularly as a determined athlete who gave of his best, told a different story. It was while at the Boys' Grammar School that Oscar developed an attraction for the languages, Latin and particularly French. And of course, later on, as he broadened his regional approaches to things, he became quite fluent at a lot of the Caribbean Basin dialects and Spanish. And because of his language skills, that proved to be quite an asset when he had to work outside of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and in other Caribbean islands. Having not the luck to have his parents around him at an early age, he quickly developed an independence of his own that will shape the rest of his academic, social, political, economic, cultural, and religious life. In fact, his whole persona. But while this is true, the bonding with the immediate siblings, especially his sister, would impact his worldwide view. His late beloved sister, Pauline Allen, who later became part of the Young clan by virtue of marriage, had the most lasting impression on him as a young man. It is her strong virtue as a disciplinarian and a woman of substance that must be credited for Oscar's disciplined approach to life and living. It is she and others like her in the community who nurtured him and his other siblings in a time of great loss. It is Mrs. Young who, having gained the love and respect of our community, who must have reinforced the biblical injunction to love your neighbor as yourself. After leaving school, Oscar had a short stint with the Ministry of Agriculture, where he gained more than a bird's eye view of the ins and outs of the agricultural industry here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In the mid-1960s, he returned to his alma mater, where he taught, among other things, the languages. In 1967, Oscar left St. Vincent and the Grenadines for Jamaica to be trained at the United Theological College of the West Indies, UTCWI, for the Methodist ministry. It is at this institution he met Birchfield Amer from Antigua, who became a true brother and friend. From day one, Oscar and Birchfield made history for being the only ministerial students to create controversy at UTCWI for attending a fete at the neighboring Mona campus on their very arrival at the institution. A record that has not been broken up to this day. Birchfield Emma described Oscar as a serious but innovative student who not only focused on his work, but also went beyond what was required. He enthusiastically recalls the lengthy hours spent at the University of the West Indies Mona Campus Library, reading the latest publication in a wide variety of subject areas that they shared together. To him, that's to Emma, Oscar Allen was the most eloquent, erudite, and theologically astute student, if not person at the college. Confronted by the economic conditions in Jamaica at the time and influenced by the early independent thought and way of life, both Oscar and Birchfield understood and practiced sustainable development at its best and cheapest. They made their own shoes and even acquired a sewing machine to design and produce their own clothing, a combination of short jacks and dashikis, a lesson that probably a lot of us need to learn today. In many ways, Oscar Allen transcended his time and space. He was and still is misunderstood by the status quo, not only in his thinking, but also in his deportment, the chief among them being his beloved Methodist Church. It is perhaps his assignment in the Republic of Haiti that has shaped, and one might say, provoked him towards a socialist orientation, which up to this day permeates his whole being. To him, what he saw in Haiti, the first independent black country in the hemisphere, but the level of poverty. He speaks about a lady who brought her last set of eggs to the minister and fainted one day in church. And when the issue was examined, she fainted for lack of food. This whole situation in Haiti changed Oscar completely. The truth is, though, Oscar had been challenged from early by the biblical injunction in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 4, 18 to 19. Jesus said, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." To him, if you love your God, you have to love your fellow man. And that is what shaped him, that love for God must be reflected in love for your fellow man. So Oscar's experience of the church before and during his time at college made him more than just a pastor, a true agent of change. So it is clear that the church and the college and him, they were on a collision course. There are different views about how he left. We're not getting to that tonight. However, he left the college. After leaving the college, Oscar devoted his time, talents, and intellectual abilities to building relationships and structures through community mobilization, training, action, and reflection in the region, and particularly in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So Diamond became his point of departure in a sense. His admiration for Walter Rodney was well known. So he set out to build a lot of organizations in St. Vincent and in the region, the National Farmers Union, AWI, Caripeda, the Walter Rodney Center, Projects Promotions Limited, and a host of others, mainly focusing on uplifting the poor and working class people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. As a political organizer, Oscar Allen conducted small group meetings at his home and elsewhere in Diamond Village to strategize on important matters. Political education formed part of his daily agenda, but it is journeys from Diamond Village to Greg's, to Cannery, to Park Hill and the surrounding areas that he made his grounded with the masses. It is at these meetings that his experience as a teacher and his trainings as a theologian produced a unique blend of vocabulary and eloquence that can only be Oscar Allen. It is no wonder that he earned the respect of many from a wide cross-section of the Vincentian and Caribbean society. His ascendancy to the leadership of the United Peoples Movement after the general election of 1979 is testimony of his commitment not only to that organization, but also to the people whose lives he tried to shape and change. Sisters and brothers, God gives us in every generation and time sons and daughters, politicians, preachers, teachers, and sportsmen and women who have in their own amazing way stunned the world. But it is a rarity in any single generation that God gives to humanity a son or daughter whose life and vocation transcend its own purpose and time. Because Oscar was not just about achievement. Some people live for achievement, but achievement without service is hollow indeed. His life was a life of service. Oscar, the man of numerous gifts, who labored in many fields, in my view, was first and foremost a Methodist pastor. Some people don't know, but I know him enough to know that he was first and foremost a Methodist pastor who lived his life to love his God and to love his fellow man. That labor of love, in my view, was his mission. In closing, if you ask me what gift I would cherish from him most, the Bible says we could desire good gifts from people, all right? Not that we want to take them, but we could desire good gifts. And I would say, if he had the power to will that gift, that's the one I would ask for. His ability to be firm, yet without any rancor. That's the man we know and love.
Thank you very much, Brother Simeon, for that very revealing citation. And I want to thank you very much for sharing those bits and pieces of the life of Brother Allen. I now have the pleasure of inviting the group from Diamond and Anthem to perhaps give us some of the poetry and some of the songs. We are mindful of the time and that we are alive, so we ask you to keep it within good time. May I invite you now to come forward.
When you see, sometimes at night, we spent a lot of time with Oscar in his house. And we hardly ever, when we were discussing biblical things, he had a love for singing. So there would be a drum, and then with the drum, we would sing. So I'm going to do some short pieces. We're going to do some short pieces, unprepared, unrehearsed, but we're still going to do it. This one is one which he did not write. It was written by, I think, the name would come, but he was a student at Oscar at college. He later became a professor at the University of the West Indies. You know what I'm talking about? He later became a sociology professor at the University of the West Indies. Anyhow, the song is about the Barry Chavans. Barry. The song is about the acts about the Holy Spirit coming down, all right, and grabbing the disciples. It goes something like this. Black up, sun this arise and people say we black up. But the Spirit of the Lord fly down like a fire, grab wind we soul like a choir, singing higher, higher, higher. Him blow like a hurricane, him blow the fire right down the lane. But the Spirit of the Lord fly down like a fire, grab wind we soul like a choir, singing higher, 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 higher. this is so we used to sing these songs together. It's a telling way of talking about the day of Pentecost when the Spirit of the Lord came down on the disciples. This is one about the glorious love. It's called The Son of God Sleep Ado, them push for Mary Ado. Me not had no more room, no. When they call for the glorious love come down. Just leave the chorus. The Son of God sleep ado. Them push for Mary ado. Me not had no more room, no. When they call for the glorious love come down. Just a little piece after that.
A is for Africa, B means black. See the black children on the freedom charts. Speak with Islamic with body and soul to end expression with people control. F is for freedom that we're fighting for.
Not all.
We're gonna get it and we must endure.
All right. So, you see, so we black alphabet.
There's a little girl who did this beautifully 2 emancipation days ago, so I was looking for her because I thought she might have known.
No, we didn't arrange. We didn't arrange.
She's there. There she is.
All right, and then we're going to do this last piece because we spent a lot of time with the drum. You know, sometimes we didn't feel like discussing political issues. And for our own, it's not like now when we had television and so on and so forth. So when we wanted to entertain ourselves, we would make some banana porridge, make some potato porridge, and for the night, we would drum and sing and recite poetry and so on. Nowadays, the guys don't have time with that because they have their television at home and everything, but that is what we did.
Oh, sleep. Take the shackles off your body. Oh, sleep. Take the chains off your mind.
The one that I want to sing is one where he was asking mankind's Savior to show him where he lives. So, mankind Savior, tell me which part you live. Me want come sit and talk. Mankind Savior, tell me which part you live. Me want come sit and talk. Mankind Savior, tell me which part you live. We going follow the road and we going come see and find out where the Son of Man live. The Son of man. Jesus take away me sins and he give me bread for eat and he give me wine for drink. The body and blood, eternal life. Eternal life. Eternal life. And when you eat this bread and you drink this wine, you remember him. And when you eat this bread and you drink this wine, you remember him. And when you eat this bread and you drink this wine, you remember the death of the Lord till he come again with kings of kings, with kings of kings. Jesus take with me sins and he give me bread for eat and he give me wine for drink. The body and blood, eternal life. Eternal life.
You see, and I want you to notice that when I say he was first and foremost a Methodist pastor. You see the songs? Oscar didn't waste time with, it's a lot of biblical teachings that came to the songs. All right? That is what we did. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sister Cheryl, Simeon, and Tigi, for delighting our hearts in song and poetry. Thank you very much. Please give him another round of applause. And we promise you next time we will have the drums and the guitar and so on. It makes them even sweeter. All right, it's my pleasure now to invite Sister Celine Jack to introduce our special speaker for this evening, Sister Celine.
I acknowledge the protocol that has been established. Ladies and gentlemen, this task tonight of introducing our guest of honor is a great privilege. Having known him for almost half a century, and really having not seen him in the flesh since the 1970s. The Reverend Patrick Perrin, Jamaican by birth, served the South Caribbean district of the Methodist Church in the Caribbean and the Americas in 1973 to 76 in the Port of Spain circuit in Trinidad. His ministerial responsibilities included youth work and development throughout the district, and the district covers St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados, Grenada, Tobago, Trinidad. His appointment in Trinidad coincided with that era of militancy that gave rise to the Black Power movement in Trinidad around 1968 to 70, and which infected and affected the entire Caribbean, having itself gained influence from the civil rights movement in the USA and upheavals the world over. As we would remember, there was an attempt by a number of social elements, people and interest groups to force socio-political change, and that brought with it its own plethora of doctrines and ideologies. And youths had to contend with this. Youth was therefore in ferment and foment, yearning for emancipation from socio-political and religious suppression and oppression. And this was the milieu the dynamic reverend, the youth himself, had to minister in. the right man for the right time, to help to chart a course for youth and people in general, and steer them to the incomparable and most credible leadership of Jesus Christ. Reverend Perrin pastored churches in many other places. His current pastorate at St. John's United Methodist Church at Elmont in the state of New York, USA, embraces not only his immediate flock, but the entire community where he serves. Adequately enabled not only by his grounding in theology, but also by a strong community and social services professionalism. He is an ardent musician and is well versed in certain languages, including French, Greek, Hebrew, Italian, Latin, Portuguese, still more to come, Spanish, and Jamaican, which I think will be the spoken language tonight. Today, I think our post-modern Caribbean context is very much similar to that of the 1970s. Youth is in ferment and foment, yearning for emancipation from socio-political and religious oppression and suppression. So tonight we are blessed to have our guest speaker present the inaugural Oscar Allen Memorial, Oscar Allen Emancipation Memorial Lecture. The right man for the right time? I think so. Ladies and gentlemen, the Reverend Patrick Perrin.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Celine. I was sort of tricked today because I asked Brother Ron, do you know Celine Jack? And he said, yes, you know. And I didn't know you were still in touch with her. I said, yeah. He said nothing else. And so I was surprised when I came and saw her name. Just want to acknowledge our President's Honorable Brother Caesar, and Mrs. Dan Wilpel, the chair of our evening here, Dr. Fraser, and I sort of did not recognize Reverend Belfield Costello and Reverend Silbert Prescott. When I came, I just sort of saw these guys and I knew their faces, you know. Reverend Prescott served my home church in Spanish Town, and I just wanted to greet them, especially tonight. And of course, Reverend Belfield is one of the Vincentians who has influenced me along with Oscar and Gideon Forbes, Providence, you know, those guys, Chris John, Elijah Beach, Cyril Dixon was my pastor in Spanish. So I should have been a Vincentian, I'm sure. But I just want to thank for hospitality Brother Rodney and Sir Errol for the care they've been taking to me the last few hours that I've been here. So allow me to begin by congratulating the UWI Open Campus and friends of Oscar Allen on this concept and birthing of this lecture series in honor of Oscar, Brother A, as he was affectionately and respectfully called. The annual Oscar Allen Emancipation Memorial Lecture Series will serve to preserve not only an important legacy of Brother A of Diamond Village here in Hyrule. He made sure he told me that the name of this country was Hyrule, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but also the name of one who, in my estimation, was an outstanding and remarkable son of the Caribbean. My being invited to this delivery room, I would call it, is a signal honor and a privilege and grave responsibility. And for these reasons, I must also thank you. My response to the invitation, as awesome and flattering as it sounded, was immediate and positive. And during the next few minutes that you have afforded me here, I will endeavor to show why this was so. Oscar Allen, the man, his work, and his influence will demand the most careful and painstaking research effort imaginable, lasting for a significant period of time. And so this introductory lecture is an invitation to students, scholars at various levels of our educational system and in various countries to begin the process I myself have just begun. Oscar, as simple, quiet, and unassuming as he may have appeared to be, was a very complex individual. Mr. Jomo Thomas, Speaker of the St. Vincent House of Parliament, upon Oscar's passing, speaking to Eyewitness News, said this: "He's a good man to emulate, a very simple man, humble, soft-spoken, but very profound." And I believe I know what Speaker Thomas is talking about when he said very profound. The words of Winston Churchill come to mind when I think about this great son of Hyrule called Brother A. Winston Churchill once described Russia as a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. Churchill was not saying this in a very complimentary manner about Russia. But I assure you that I can say the same of Oscar Allen and do so in the most complimentary manner possible. What I will attempt to do here this evening is to open a door upon the life of this noble son of the Caribbean, whom we remember through this series, and will keep on remembering. Future scholars and researchers will one day put all the complex pieces together as we seek over time to solve the mystery that is Oscar Allen. And when this begins to happen, we will see a man who truly made a mark on humanity through the tremendous amount of hard work he had accomplished with and for the people, and the tremendous influence he wielded upon those who knew him and will continue to wield for generations to come. And so I am presenting here this evening not a scholarly biographical work, that will come in due course. I am offering a portrait of a man seen from several different angles, up close and personal, and a sketch of the indelible mark that Oscar Allen has knowingly and unknowingly left upon my life. I was privileged to call him a friend, nay, a brother, Brother A. And many of you were also privileged to do the same. And I seek to present myself before you in the spirit of this great man whose life and legacy we celebrate, even by the dashiki that I'm wearing tonight. Oscar Allen, the man. Much of what I'm going to say now is autobiographical because my own self-awareness and outlook on life was impacted by one Oscar Allen. Oscar would use the word consciousness to describe my transformation. In 1968, I moved to the campus of the UTCWI, United Theological College, and began my third year as a student of the University of the West Indies. I lived among the theological students, knowing that I would begin my candidacy for the Methodist ministry in the Methodist Conference of the Caribbean and the Americas, MCCA, in that year. I took that opportunity to become acquainted with the theologues and was introduced to one who was not there. The name Oscar Allen kept coming up very often, and I heard that he was in Haiti, spending a year there. There was a need in Haiti for which Oscar had volunteered because of his facility in French, and everyone waited in anticipation for the return of Oscar Allen, and I waited also. It had begun to be apparent, even in absentia, that Oscar was an unusual student, that Oscar was not the regular one of the male students. I had already established a friendship with a student called Birchfield Amo. You heard about him. Amo was also a very unusual student. He was brash, confrontational, a rabble-rouser, a reformer, and nonconformer. Birch and I struck up a friendship as we both had an interest in the happenings over in the Mary C. Cole Hall on the Mona campus, the ladies' hall. And we would make our way over there and return at the curfew time, and all visitors, especially male visitors, had to leave the hall. And we'd walk back to UTC together, and Bert would frequently refer to Oscar and say, "Wait until you meet him." Now, that meeting took place in September of 1969, By that time, I was officially a first-year student of theology, but completing the final 2 years at the university. For those who have met Oscar and known Oscar, you will know that Oscar immediately treated me as if he had known me for a long time. And so there became three of us, Allen, Emma, and Perrin. We were young, gifted, and black. And we didn't call ourselves that. Aretha Franklin, of blessed memory, did. So shortly after meeting Oscar, I experienced the magnificent sense of humor he possessed. He came to me one Saturday morning and he said he needed to have a ride to downtown Kingston and asked what time I was leaving the campus. I told him I was leaving at 10 o'clock. He said, okay, leave at 10. At 10 o'clock, I did not see Oscar. I began to search the entire campus for him. Nowhere to be found. I eventually left and I went my way, and then when I saw him in the afternoon, I said, Oscar, you said you were leaving at, what happened to you? You said that you were leaving at 10, didn't you? I said, yeah. Well, I told you to leave at 10. I didn't tell you I was waiting for you. I went on my way. No? Another example of that, too. One evening, Oscar borrowed my car, and after about an hour or so, he came asking a few of us to come and help him with the car. The car had a problem, he said. So we went, and we saw the car had jumped over a protective barrier and down an incline. So, Oscar, what happened? He told me that he told the car to stop, and the car wouldn't stop. Couldn't argue with that man, Another one of his humor, he had no patience, as you know, for persons, especially young people who were not progressive in their thinking. So they would rub him the wrong way. One of our sessions at one of the camps, there was a young man who happened to have been very troublesome in a sense as far as Oscar was concerned. So at the time, people were wearing this platform shoes. Men and women had these high platform shoes, right? And this guy was wearing a high platform shoes. So when Oscar was really tired of him, Oscar turned to me and said, Pat, I'm going to change the guy's name for protecting the innocent. What's wrong with that boy, John? He looks like an ass. He talks like an ass. He grins like an ass. And even his shoes look like... Well, that was Oscar, Well, the year 1969, when Oscar returned to UTC campus, that year found, as you heard, the students were in a sort of turmoil, Students all over the world. The previous year, 68, the several student uprisings in East and Western Europe, the United States, Asia, Latin America, and of course in the Caribbean. The Black Power stuff. The Rodney Affair had taken place in Jamaica. The Black Power movement had echoed all the way to Trinidad and the Caribbean. And we were in the Caribbean redefining ourselves. The Mona campus at the UWI was fertile with various schools of thought contending. Student power and the demand for student control of their student government and active participation in the governance of institutions only compounded the undercurrents of political agitation provoked by what could be termed reactionary actions of the various governments of the region, notably among them the Jamaican government, at that time led by Hugh Shearer, the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Shearer had already mischaracterized the true situation on the campus following the Rodney Affair. And this year, October 16th, is the 50th anniversary of that watershed moment in the history of Jamaica and indeed the Caribbean. The Rodney Affair was the name given to the student uprising in Jamaica following the banning from Jamaica of a popular Guyanese lecturer, Dr. Walter Rodney. Rodney was declared persona non grata, and what started out as a peaceful demonstration quickly escalated into riots in downtown Kingston. University students were blamed for the uprising. In response to the Rodney Affair, the Prime Minister, in a rather uninformed and unsophisticated manner, crudely blamed the student uprising on non-Jamaicans. He said these non-Jamaicans were from the small islands, and they did not like Jamaica. He singled out then President of the Guild of Honor Graduates, Ralph Gonzalez, for ridicule and vilification, accusing him of having political ambitions. Reported that Gonzalez had said that one day he wanted to become Prime Minister of his country, which I believe is St. Vincent. And I believe he still is. In the following year, there was another shutdown of the Mona campus. The government of Jamaica again expelled a leading Caribbean economist called C.Y. Thomas. A third source of unrest stemmed from the student support for the striking non-academic workers who were trying to fight for the right to form and join a union of their choice, among other grievances. The guild president at that time was Robert Pickersgill. So I've just set the climate for the socio-political backdrop for the return of Oscar Allen from Haiti. Oscar joined us at the height of these recent outbursts or unrest and agitation. And he rejoined an institution that was itself struggling to establish an identity. That institution was the United Theological College of the West Indies, UTCWI. UTCWI came into being as a result of the marriage of several antecedent theological schools and colleges. It was the only one of its kind in the world. 6 Protestant denominations came together, and there was also cooperation with the Roman Catholic Seminary located just next to it. Now, the UTC was not a theological faculty of the UWI, and so it was governed by the denominations which formed the board. And these denominations were largely influenced by the mission boards of Europe and North America, including Canada, which supplied some of the staff and the financial support needed to keep that experiment in ecumenism functioning. Now, the leadership of the UTCWI and also of the churches which supported the college were never comfortable with the juxtaposition of the theological students and the university students. Many were wary of the influence that the UWI students would have on the theologians, for example, going to fetes, and the danger of increasing secularization. Others were just naively hopeful that maybe UTCWI would have a good influence on the UWI. Internally, there was also the possibility that interdenominational rivalry could spring up among the constituent student groups. That actually did not happen. But it was into this milieu that Oscar landed, and that was just the kind of setting that Oscar enjoyed. Oscar came to the Methodist ministry from the South Caribbean district, this district. And this district has been, and probably still is, the most progressive of all the 8 districts of the MCCA. The MCCA itself, which was inaugurated in 1967, was the 3rd experiment in Methodist unity in the Caribbean after 2 other conferences had failed. Largest through the leadership of Reverend Hugh Sherlock of Jamaica, and with much needed support from Premier Vere Bird in Antigua, the MCCA established with headquarters in Antigua on lands donated by the government of Antigua. So here we have a number of institutions struggling to establish an identity: UTCWI, the MCCA, the UWI itself, coupled with the emerging national governments newly independent or seeking independence in the various territories. All, church and states alike, grappling with the last vestiges of a dying colonialism. The question really was, who were these institutions serving? Who were they supposed to serve? Well, Oscar framed the question very simply. Are we students? Are we the students as students serving the churches, beholden to the colonial or the neo-colonial masters, masters of the church or masters of the state? Or are we beholden to the masses waiting to be liberated? You know what Oscar would choose. Oscar did not have an identity crisis. He knew fully well who he was. He knew fully whose cause he was defending. He was comfortable in the castle of his skin. And on reflection, especially since Oscar's death, and more so since your invitation to me to lead off this Emancipation lecture series, I believe Oscar was the Caribbean's first liberation theologian. If he was not the first, then Marcus Garvey was the first. You see, Martin Luther in Latin defined a theologian and how one becomes a theologian in these words: vivendo, imo moriendo, et damnando, fit theologos, non intelligendo, legendo, aut speculando. Meaning, by living, no, more by dying and being damned to hell, does one become a theologian, not by knowing, reading, or speculation. When Oscar returned to the campus of UTCWI from Haiti, he was determined that his calling into ministry would be radically adjusted. This trademark dashiki, beard, and sandals would not only define him, but personify his calling to serve the least of these brothers and sisters of Jesus. He sat with me and Birch in his room, and he shared that he wanted to go back to Haiti. The people of Haiti had given him a very, very special parting gift. He said that he was slightly embarrassed by the gift because he appreciated the sacrifice that the people had made to collect the money to buy that gift. It was an expensive camera. And he shared that he would not be able to use the camera in any meaningful way. So he gave that camera to Birchfield, to you use it. But he did more than that. He gave away his suits, his shirts, his neckties. He gave away his shoes. He decided to live a very Spartan life. He chose a life of poverty in solidarity with the poor. That moment reminded me of a scene from the movie Becket, in which Thomas Becket was installed by King Henry II as Archbishop of Canterbury and immediately gave away all his worldly possessions. No longer was Oscar able to fit into the image of a Methodist minister, as conjured up in the minds, especially of the Jamaican church leaders, and their middle-class identification and aspirations. I invited Oscar to preach in my hometown, Spanish Town, and I heard him preach a marvelous sermon one night about Jesus and the children them, using the vernacular, Jamaican patois all through the sermon, freely, with a musical Vincentian accent. And during the notices, he changed, and then he assumed a rather British and BBC persona. On Wednesday, the ladies will meet. And this was just marvelous, Then he went back to his narrative preaching. Over the course of the year that followed, there were many student discussions and demonstrations, both at the UWI and at UTC, and Oscar was very much a part of these deliberations. There was a way in which he conducted his interactions, never ceased to fascinate me. He had what I call a Hegelian style. He would pose a very simple question, usually one which would lead to a very involved discussion. He would listen carefully to each speaker and follow the lines of argument. Usually when the discussion seemed to reach some kind of resolution, Oscar would say, suppose we looked at this another way. People. And he would proceed with a new thesis, a new antithesis. And this would lead to another involved discussion. And then when the antagonist reached a point of complete confusion or deadlock, Oscar would come in with a series of axioms, and he would eventually lead to a new clarity, some fresh air, a ray of light. And then in typical Oscar Allen fashion, he would say, "May I be excused, please?" He would just disappear for some time, a few days before you saw him again. He could not tolerate the decadence, mark that word, of some people, or the irrelevance. Those were his two famous words, decadence and irrelevance. So when it was clear that Oscar could not go along with the prescribed courses in theology leading to the Bachelor of Arts, they would not prepare him for effective service in Haiti, he began to proposition the Methodist authorities for a change in his course of study. He requested that he be allowed to pursue courses at the Jamaica School of Agriculture so that he could contribute to the agrarian reforms that Haiti needed, and that the Methodist Church itself in Haiti had already been establishing, had a good track record, could implement those changes. So Oscar really was anxious to go back and join that. Well, he also suggested an alternative when they wouldn't hear him. A course of study at the College of Arts, Science and Technology, CAS, it's now called University of Technology, UTech, which would make him proficient in some mechanical or other skills that he could in turn impart to the people of Haiti. Now, when these requests began to be met with resistance and threats from the establishment, Oscar bluntly refused to attend theology lectures any further. In the meantime, he turned his attention to the student government of the UTCWI. there was a suspicion that the faculty found ways and means to install the student leadership of their choice. The executive, therefore, was not giving the qualitative leadership to the student body that could result in the formation of leaders for the Church of the Caribbean, leaders who could become agents of transformation. So Oscar, Birchfield, and I sat up one night, right through the night, with the bylaws of the student body, which we suspected might have also been designed and handed down by the faculty a few years before we got there. So we began to reshape the bylaws, and we started with a statement of purpose. We overhauled the entire legal document. The challenge for us was, how do we propose it and have it accepted by the entire student body? Oscar's solution was simple. Make it into a manifesto, form a political party, run on the manifesto, and if the party succeeds in becoming the student government, then the bylaws automatically become the bylaws, the new bylaws of the students. Good. So we formed SAC, the Student Action Committee. And when the elections were over, Oscar was the president of the student body. Birchfield was the secretary. I was the communications officer. A first-year student, Rudy Matai, was elected vice president. Now, under the old bylaws, only fourth-year students were eligible to run for president and vice. So we changed that. Anybody could run. And a first-year student was elected vice president. Now, the election results must have given the authorities of the college and the church the impetus to move quickly. The impasse over the course of studies resulted in a meeting between Oscar and the Ministerial Training Committee, the MTC of the Methodist Church. Now, summer vacation came. Oscar was not given any summer appointment, but was asked to wait on the campus for a decision as to the result of his request for a change in the course of study. So I opted to stay on the campus with him instead of going home. It was my privilege as a second-year student to go home, but I stayed on the campus. And I was the one whom Oscar asked to open that ominous letter from Antigua, written by the Reverend Hugh Sherlock, president of the MCCA. With a note of regret and an apology, Oscar was told to use your gifts elsewhere. Now, Oscar penned a very stinging response, which I toned down a bit. I do hope that someone in his record will find that letter that he didn't send. We need to have it. But I left the line that I think I had to leave that line in because, he said it was very presumptuous for someone who had not even met me to have no qualms in pronouncing judgment on me. I left that line there. I'd like to see that letter too in the files of Antigua. Not only did the student body lose a leader, but the ancillary staff, the groundsmen and the domestic staff, lost an advisor and a friend. Oscar returned to St. Vincent, and without any bitterness or rancor, proceeded to use his gifts in the service of the people. He continued as a local preacher in the Methodist Church and served until the time of his passing. What about Oscar Allen, his work and his influence? So let me turn more specifically to some of Oscar's work and the influence he had. In September 1970, when the students returned to UTC and our newly elected president was no longer with us, we installed the vice president, Rudy Matai, a second-year student by then, as president of the student body. After graduation, Rudy served in Guyana as a youth service officer for the government. Today, Rudy is a professor of social and psychological foundations of education at the State University of New York in Buffalo. Rudy has initiated a research project called Responsive Inner City Education, RICE, experimenting in post-secondary education. His impact has reached as far as Australia. And I believe I detect in Rudy's subsequent activities post-UTC some of Oscar's own activism. Oscar had returned home and would certainly have had no problems in resuming his secular life in his native Hairoun. There was no question as to his intellectual ability and his track record as a teacher and public service. So someone in government offered Oscar a position. And I was surprised when I heard from Oscar he had not got the position as we thought he was going to get. So I came to the synod here in 1974, and I saw that government officer, and I asked him about Oscar. What happened why Oscar didn't get the job? And he explained to me that Oscar was asked to present references and recommendations. And the problem was, as far as the government was concerned, Oscar had obtained a number of recommendations, but they were from ex-prisoners and other questionable persons. Well, you know the man. So when I asked Oscar, I said, Oscar, what happened? He was very nonchalant. He said the problem was clearly the government's problem, wasn't Oscar's problem. In Oscar's words, well, those are the people who know me. They are the people I work with. They are the ones who are best able to recommend me. And as you know, Oscar had that typical smile on his face. You know? He was not to be deterred. He began working for the United Nations FAO, Food and Agriculture, as a communications officer. And on occasion, he would come to Trinidad, stay at Tunapuna Mans, where I was with me and my wife, Pansy, while he traveled to various villages and contacted farmers. And I would usually go along with him to these visits and on these visits. So you can imagine I was surprised when a few weeks after Oscar left after one of his visits, I received a visit from someone who began to ask me a number of questions about Oscar. So my wife said, why are you asking us all these things about Mr. Allen? He identified himself as one of the security officers in the country and said the government was tracking Oscar's movements. Well, Oscar, he had been a member of the World Student Christian Federation, the WSCF. He attended the Helsinki Assembly. I'm going to just quote what the World Student Christian Federation said about themselves. It says, in the 1960s and 70s, the WSCF movements, especially in North America and Europe, were closely involved with the radical political movements. Their political solidarity and their critique of education convinced them that the mission field was no longer in educational institutions, but on the streets and in the villages. The theme of the WSCF in the 70s was Christian witness in a struggle for liberation. And that sums up the political commitment of the WSCF. At the same time, it moved to a regional structure. The political debates in the WSCF were painful, at times divisive. End of quote. See, while he was at the UWI in Mona, I was the president of the local SCM. And Oscar frequently led our sessions, especially our devotional and Bible study sessions, where he could always be expected to give a fresh new perspective and interpretation on Scripture. That was Oscar. Now, at my first synod here in the South Caribbean, held in St. Vincent, January 1974, the youth in the circuit prepared a dramatic presentation for one of the synod services. The presentation was based on the healing of a man with a withered hand. Story from the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And Oscar worked with the youth on the presentation. The brilliant expository skills of Oscar came out especially at the very end of the drama, when the man whose character was being acted by Freddie Alexander, he's now a retired presbyter in Jamaica, Freddie raised his hand in the black power, fists clenched. The message was very clear. What was not lost on the congregation, including the ministers from every circuit in the district, was the position taken by the religious leaders in the synagogue as they objected to Jesus' healing of a man with a deformity. And what was certainly not lost was the fact that the leaders plotted to get rid of Jesus. Reverend Alan Curtin, who was sitting beside me, he remarked sadly how foolish the Methodist Church was in terminating Oscar's candidacy. As the district youth secretary, it was my responsibility to plan and direct the annual District Youth Leaders Training Seminar, DILT. 100 young people from the South Caribbean, others from Guyana, Haiti, and Jamaica would attend. And I invited Oscar to lead the session on leadership. Evaluations at the end of every session always rated Oscar's session as the most important and the most highly useful by the youth. Not only was he a force to reckon with in the training sessions, but he was extremely resourceful in other areas. In Grenada in 1976, we had some challenges in the kitchen. The first challenge was when the local youth leaders reported that there was no meat for dinner on that first night of the camp. Oscar was with me, and he asked if there were any farmers whom we could approach for an animal. The leaders said, yes, there's somebody in the hills, and they took us up into the hills of St. George's. Oscar took over, and he spoke to the farmer we met there, and the farmer not only agreed to donate a sheep, citing his mother's connection with the Methodist Church, but to slaughter the animal, to clean it, bring it down to the camp at Woburn. We feasted that night, thanks to Oscar. By the third day, we had another crisis. Cereal for breakfast was not available. Oscar came to the rescue. He suggested banana porridge. And we went into the kitchen, and he showed the cooks how to prepare banana porridge. You know, the Bajans don't like that. You know. It became a very favorite meal for the rest of the camp, and even the skeptical Bajans were won over to this highly indigenous and nutritious meal. Many of the youths that Oscar met in those camps became leaders not only in the church, but in their various communities across the Caribbean. In 1971, Christian Action for Development in the Caribbean, CADEC, held a consultation at Chaguaramas in Trinidad. One of the youth representatives from Trinidad, Miss Hussein was her name, convened the youth delegates. I was representing UTCWI. Now, there was no clear agenda for that meeting, but Oscar, not known to be a time waster, proposed that we take a stand against the Governor General's cocktail party, which was scheduled for the next day. Not only did he indicate his intention not to attend, but he invited the youths to do the same and to move a resolution on the floor of the consultation that all the members would just boycott the event. The delegates asked me to move the resolution on the floor, but I quickly thought that my doing so may have put in jeopardy a visiting lecturer from the USA who was at UTC. He also wore the shiki. Because I was told by a relative of mine who worked with the police that he was under surveillance by the Jamaican government. So I didn't wish to link that resolution with that lecturer in any way, because you know they can do that. So I proposed a brilliant young Jamaican lawyer who was representing the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, would move the resolution. His name was Rodney Affair. The resolution passed. Only one person voted against it, and that was the Anglican bishop. It was a defining moment in the history of the Caribbean church. The debate on the floor itself, in Oscar's words, really signaled the real start of the consultation. Prime Minister Eric Williams of Trinidad reported the Caribbean Church to the Vatican and the World Council of Churches. Oh, that was a very surprising move to me, for Eric to do that. But the impact of that resolution was to position the Caribbean church where it needed to be, in the preferential option for the poor, the words of Dr. Roy Nehall, who addressed us the night before. Owen Batiste, writing the next day in the Trinidad Express, entitled his front page editorial, Church, State, and Status Quo. And he applauded the church for at last taking a stand on behalf of the poor. That was Oscar. Not many Caribbean church folks today know of Oscar's role in moving the Caribbean church forward. I reached out to some colleagues in Haiti to see if there were any documents of Oscar's ministry there. And they'll be searching the records, but they responded to two letters to me. One, dear Reverend Perrin, I've been able to talk to Fred Jean-Pierre. It turns out that he knew Oscar Allen very well and worked with him while in Petit Goâve circuit. Fred confirmed that what I thought. Oscar came to Haiti in order to work in the Petit Goâve circuit, while my father, then superintendent of the circuit, was going to be away either on sick leave or for the sake of security at a time of political stress with Papa Doc in power. When it was known that my father was going to be away, Oscar agreed and offered to spend 1 year out of college in order to help. That year changed Oscar's perspectives on ministry. He got to see that ministry is not just about evangelism and spirituality, but also with involvement in social activities. Oscar was very bright, and in no time he learned Creole. He was very full of joy, energetic, and visited all the rural congregations, walking on foot or on horse. He was involved in every aspect of the life of the circuit, offering pastoral presence, accompanying the youth. He had faith in agriculture. He was a founding member of a group called Activité Chrétienne, which founded in the Périgord congregation, that was supposed to spread into the other congregations also. And this group, which dedicated itself to launch activities in evangelism, spiritual presence, and social outreach, is celebrating its 50th anniversary this weekend. Fred, the speaker, July 29th. On his return to Jamaica for theological training, Oscar wanted to add some practical social training to his training program so that he could come back to Haiti and work more efficiently. But it seems that the MCCA was not yet ready for this type of involvement, so Oscar had to give up training at UTC. As I promised, I will talk to Bishop Jesna Paul regarding documents. I will also talk to my brother Pierre, who might have been around at the time. So here's the second letter. I spoke to my brother Pierre regarding Oscar Allen. He confirmed what Pastor Fed said. He added that Oscar had come back to Haiti sometime after leaving UTC with a delegation and was investigating some action in the field of community development and agriculture. Oscar then expressed regrets that our church was not ready to give him further training so that he could be ready for a special ministry in the field of community development in Haiti. Reverend Marco Depes, Secretary, Methodist Church in Haiti. Let me begin to summarize. You'll pardon me if my summary appears to be autobiographical, which it is. It's also an apology to the people of Cane Grove in Leo, because I was stationed to go to Cane Grove, Stubbs, by the Synod of the South Caribbean in January 1973. I spent my final UTC year, not at UTC, but at CTS in Indianapolis. And while I was there, the news of my station arrived, and I began to direct my mail to St. Vincent. I think some of them are still there. In May, the news came to me that my station was changed. I was no longer going to St. Vincent, but to reside in Tunapuna, in the Port of Spain circuit. The ministerial tutor at the time gave me some reason why the change was made. It included being suitable for the St. Augustine chaplaincy at the UWI. So I arrived in Trinidad in August of 73, served there until 76. I was giving the authorities in the MCCA a little problem, a little fight over the requirements of the probationary studies. All students had to do probationary studies. As a result of representation that were already made to the MCCA by Oscar and Birch and other vocal students, certain aspects of the study were to have been changed, but they were not changed. So I refused to do what was handed to me. Typical Oscar style, you know? So the conference in Jamaica in 76 was faced with a choice. The same fate that was handed to Oscar by the MTC, comprised mainly of ministers and laypersons from Jamaica, was to be handed down to me. But the South Caribbean district where I was did not want the responsibility of expelling me. Many of them had objected when Oscar was terminated. They had accepted Oscar into the South Caribbean district, the most progressive district I said earlier, because they had wanted a man just like Oscar to be in ministry. And in their minds, Jamaica had made a wrong decision. Now it was parents' turn. And the South Caribbean district did not want my expulsion to seem as if it was a retaliation against Jamaica for what Jamaica had done to Oscar. So I was returned home, as some said, for Jamaica to do the dirty work. And when I returned home, Jamaica had a problem. All the stations were already settled. To pull up the stations again would mean assigning several ministers. The only opening was the Excelsior chaplaincy, because Reverend Philip Ponce, who was assigned there, was sent to replace me here in this district. And it was Reverend Albert Amer who said to the chairman, send him to Excelsior. Where is he going to put him? So I ended up at Excelsior. My being sent to Excelsior was providential. And Oscar's influence on my life was not only through the administrative actions of the authorities, but in what I was able to do among the students of that institution for 8 wonderful years. Just patterning some of what Oscar would have been doing, I'm sure. Only about 5 years ago, another MCCA colleague disclosed that the real reason for sending me to Trinidad and not to St. Vincent was, you can guess it, they did not want Oscar and Patrick Perrin to be on the same aisle. See, my children would have all been Vincentians. But they were too late. In the 2 years that Oscar and I were together at UTC, I'd already learned about Bookman of the Haitian Revolution, Jean Price Mas, Ancipal Lalonde, the Haitian diplomat and thinker, the People's Revolution of Mao Zedong, the Caribs of Hyrule, An Absence of Ruin by H. Orlando Patterson, the Dynamics of West Indian Integration by Havelock Brewster and C.Y. Thomas, which Oscar characterized as the Bible for every Caribbean person to read. Secuture, Guinea-Bissau, Grounding with My Brothers by Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Walter Rodney. And I'm still trying to find a poem written by Oscar, which Oscar called Existentialist Scandal Number 1. You see, in the heat of the C.Y. Thomas demonstrations, as we sat on the grass, he wrote, and I can only recall 2 lines. If anybody can find that poem, please find it. It starts, and he's always chanting it. He said, here is a man who is a man, beating books for a piece of paper. Anybody has that? Find it and give it to us. It's a sort of satire on the university education. Well, for my wedding, which Oscar could not have attended, this is what Oscar wrote to me and my wife. It's called From the Grassroots. In the corner of my mind, my woman sits down, darning a pants bottom, singing better days are coming, feeding our hope from the grassroots. In the corner of my woman, my mind sits down at peace, without dreams, without doubts, until the time comes to suffer and to rise and to conquer and to love from the grassroots. My woman is a grassroot, strong to hold me down when the white storm blows. My love is a grassroot, feeding my woman to make her strong. And in this world, every day and every night, our corner is full of love from the grassroots of my woman. July 1972, signed Oscar. Now, Oscar wrote a very strong letter to the health authorities in St. Vincent, in which he objected to the scarcity of resource persons needed for the effective operation of the operating rooms. He asked whether or not someone has to die before adequate provisions are made for medical care. And he died shortly after writing that letter. And hundreds of villagers filed past his lifeless body in the casket, but he is still very much alive. Oscar and the People's Movement for Change have impacted the socio-political and economic life of the nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and beyond. Emancipation is still an unfinished business here and in many other parts of the world, not to mention the United States. Oscar sent me a critique that he had done of the vision paper produced by the South Caribbean District Conference of the Methodist Church. He was critical of many parts of that vision. And that, to me, is still unfinished business. Oscar and others like him were about the task of emancipating ourselves from mental slavery. That is the sine qua non of the eventual triumph of a people whose movement for change will eventuate in the total transformation of life. So let these emancipation lectures and annual ceremonies which Oscar had initiated not only be about the legacy of one who was truly a great son of the Caribbean, but let them eventually become the praxis that will lead to the transformation of a people. Oscar's people, the have-nots, the lumpen proletariats, the little people, the sufferers, the poor, with whom Oscar grounded. This is the true honor that Oscar would desire. Oscar was truly the people's pastor. Oscar emulated and followed in the footsteps of a 33-year-old leader who said, "A thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I came to give life, life that is full and good. I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd gives his life for the sheep." John 10, verse 10 and 11, from the easy-to-read version. That young 33-year-old leader was Jesus. Brethren and sistren, I thank you.
Let's give another round of applause to Reverend Perrin. Thank you very much. I'm trying to contain myself here a little bit. On behalf of the sisters and brothers gathered here and the family of Brother A, we want to thank you very much for a very inspiring, very emotional conversation, lecture. And I'm sure this is the beginning of a journey that all of us will participate in. Thank you very much, Reverend Perrin.
Thank you.
Before I open up the floor, and we are mindful that we are streaming and we are live, I want to share with you a few words from another person who has, and I should bring greetings on behalf of Maureen King, who is a Diamondite, and she called just hours this afternoon to say that that we were having the lecture in honor of Brother E, and that she wished to share a few words. And so I want to, before I open up the floor, share these very inspiring words as well. To Ronnie Daniel, Simeon Green, and my girlfriend Cheryl Johnson, who I understand will be on the panel this evening. My love to you, to everyone, and to the rest of the panel. I want to say a pleasant good night to everyone. My name is Maureen King Anthony, and I currently reside in the United States of America. When I heard that the University of the West Indies was going to have a lecture in honor of Oscar Allen, I felt so excited. I was overjoyed that Oscar's name will not be forgotten on a national level. I know on the local level, the people will never forget him. I have known Oscar for many, many years. We refer to him as Brother A. As a young Diamondite woman, I know I was so privileged to have known a man like Oscar as part of my early molding. Oscar taught young black women like myself how to value their blackness and never to be afraid of who they are. He taught us to know that black is beautiful even in an era when the black conscious movement came in. We had already been taught that value. He also taught us the worth of womanhood and how to stand tall and proud in a very humble way, how to command the attention of our audience and be judged by the content of our words and not by the color of our skin. Overall, he taught us how to be independent thinkers, which shaped us into leaders. Oscar read with us immensely, and through these readings, our visions were expanded. It gave us the ability to debate on various issues locally, regionally, and internationally, which allowed us to think outside the box. He influenced individuals to be the best that they could be through education and mentoring. He created the adult education class because he felt that through education, people would be forever empowered. For me, as a Diamondite woman, I am honored to have known a man like Oscar who could have gone anywhere in the world and made an impact. However, he chose to come back to Diamond's village and selflessly gave of himself. for that. I'm extremely grateful and appreciative. Oscar has made a historical impact, and he will always be remembered as a great man and an influential leader. However, in my heart, I will always remember him as the big man in a small village who gave this country girl, or this little country girl, hope to dream and encouraged me to be the best I can be in all that I do. For that, I want to say thank you, Brother A. Miss you forever. Love always, Maureen, aka Miss Tu. Thank you very much, Maureen. I want now to open up the floor for any comments or questions. This is an ongoing conversation, and if you notice from the presentation, there are many missing letters and documents. A bit of them I know are at the Cave Hill campus from the CCC side. You will see Oscar print on some of those things as well for his work in ecumenism, regionally and internationally. Some of those are at Cave Hill campus. But there are poems and other documents that are scattered in this country and throughout the region that we need to recapture and revisit. And we have pledged as Friends of Oscar, among with family, to continue the legacy. And this is just the beginning. Any questions, comments, we will invite you to share now. We ask you to use the microphone. It's in the back. Yuloma has the microphone, so please keep them short. We are still live, and so we want to get as many questions as possible to Reverend Perrin. And perhaps, Reverend Perrin, you could use a mic on the head table.
Yes, if I may.
Yes, Brother Dave.
Thank you very much. I must say I was touched and moved by all these sentiments expressed on behalf of Oscar Allen. Someone I knew, but maybe didn't know very well. But whatever I knew about him also had an impact on me. And before I forget, I want to agree with Reverend Perrin that I believe he was the first Caribbean liberation theologian. I wish to support and endorse that. Yes. Deep thinker, critical thinker, and someone who the status quo, as bright in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, would not readily accept. And as I get older in my wisdom years, I've come to realize, I wonder, for instance, how Oscar, as you read that letter from that sister, how he would have felt to see this growing trend of our daughters tattooing themselves from all over the body if possible. That's not my kind of woman, and I'm sure that would not have been Oscar's woman. So I must make that comment. But I'm happy with the Friends of Oscar and the University of the West Indies that we have come to our senses in this particular case. And I have to rub it in strongly because there's so much falsehoods existing in our society today. And I can't live with that. And as you said, he never tolerated decadence and irrelevance.
That's what it is.
And I wish to stand by that as well. That's all. He was a good man, and I'm happy for his remembrance, celebration in whatever form in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brother Providence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Now, it has been documented.
Yeah. Yes, we are still on radio, so please use the microphone for the quality of sound.
Yes, it has been documented that our brother Oscar spent the last hours on earth. The last hours on earth, unswervingly faithful to the task of fashioning for us Vincentians a society in which peace and justice could thrive. If they were anchored in the respect for the rights of all citizens, Citizens who were free to pursue their goals in the shelter of the overarching umbrella of freedom and equality under the sovereign authority of Jehovah the Creator. He seemed to me to have been living a life which reflected pursuit of connectivity with the Creator. I am honored to be here at this inauguration lecture, this series, and would hope that they would be administered in harmony with the ethos and character of the Oscar Allen we knew. For at a previous lecture, some of us attending were very disappointed when at question time at the end of the lecture, there was departure from the accustomed to format. We were asked to submit our written questions through an intermediary appointed by the organizers. That seemed retrogressive. It was implied that that was done to insulate the panelists against causing any displeasure to some authority. That was unfortunate. Oscar Allen was anchored in agriculture, and just before his death, he was at the center of the attempt to organize a cocoa production enterprise, which would have seen the farmers enjoying the benefits at the higher end of the market. Unfortunately, that project did not materialize. But there are many of us who, like Oscar did, believe that agriculture can play a prominent role in taking us out of the economic malaise we are in. We are therefore hoping that the UWI will play an active part in promoting the discussions which we need to have now, so that good plans and systems could be devised for the going forward. We should be endeavoring now to leave a strong platform for the next generations of Vincentians to allow them to cope successfully with the management of the debts we are going to be leaving them to repay. Agriculture offers a good base on which that dependable platform can be built. Allow me these few more lines. We cannot all be the candle on the societal lampstand, but each of us can be a part of the surface of the box upon which the match used to kindle tomorrow's flame is scratched. Therefore, in the pursuit of our ideals, let us be not unmindful of the travail of others. For though we are all but straws in the wind of time, we could be towers of strength to a brother in need. While one man by himself may not be able to dam the river, several men working diligently together can effectively change the course of any stream. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you very much, Brother Providence. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good night. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Brother Kwame.
At this Emancipation Month, to me, this Emancipation Month is a result of the work that people like Renwick, Jim Maloney, Oscar Allen, Ralph Gonsalve, Jomo, Thomas, and others people within our other people that come out there we call the Black Power movement. I myself was a product of the movement. And what I would like to say here tonight is that the work to liberate the people is a long journey. It's a very long journey. And we had to pass the baton on to one another. And Oscar left, though at the time when he moved, I was disenchanted with certain opinion he was holding. But nevertheless, all make a contribution to bring me to this day, Emancipation Day. Because in the early time you hear about, we used to hear about August Monday. But this Emancipation Month and this lecture comes about Oscar Allen. To me, Oscar in his early time in the Black Power movement was an idea. And a beautiful thing, everything we see around us say is idea. It must come in the form of idea first before it comes material. And what I notice in my society today is that we cussing one another and arguing like if we could eat one another. I would like to say we must go back to the promise. We know we must have political parties. Each of them may have some intention to contribute to our country. But one of the greatest contributions you can make to anybody and any country is to stimulate with people thinking power, to motivate with people to argue not about ourselves and the individuality, but argue for the good of humanity and the upliftment of our country. I get these ideas from among the same Black Power movement. I just thought myself as a non-academic cultural intellectual. And this moment that we are in it tonight, I would like to see we continue the discussion, not just, remember in the early Black Power days and each corner you go, here and there, panel discussion. This is the time now we need to discuss idea. We need to move it from just talk on the black to get it on the TV and radio station, because we need is idea that just generate and stimulate production and motivate man to higher heights. So I want to say the continuation of the discussion must continue. Good night.
Thank you. Sister Lucette.
Good evening, all.
Good evening.
I want to bring the discussion back to the life and work of Oscar. Sorry? Okay. My mentor. Listening to you, Professor, made me appreciate more why Oscar decided to come and look for me when we set up the front line to resist injustice in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I didn't tell Oscar that I was going to be a part of the longest protest ever in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But he found me. And what he wanted to know, Luzette, where do you go from here? And I'll remember it. I paused, and he said to me, you can't leave those women alone now, you know. And he not only said it, he actually came to the front line at one of our meetings. And I wish I had recorded that session. He was talking to us about mission and vision. And I didn't even take minutes of it. And I regret it. I'm holding in my hand a booklet which Oscar handed to me on the day I saw him in hospital the first time. And I heard somebody before now mention that Oscar's last attempt was to help cocoa farmers. He did do that work. About 4 or 5 of us were meeting, and I accidentally left this book with him. And on the hospital bed, he smiled, you know, the usual smile. He said, you remember this? I said, no. He said, well, take it. And he gave me 3 instructions. He nor I knew that it was going to be the last. He gave me 3 instructions which I shall not make public, and I'm on the way of achieving the first. And I'm so grateful that we're doing this in the name of Oscar, because he was a very proud and private man. I made several attempts, because I only got to know Oscar very late. I made several attempts to enter into what I saw as a mystery, and he never allowed me. He said, when I die, you will hear. And that is true. I am hearing now. And I want to thank you, Ronnie. I know you were behind this, and I understand Cecil, Ryan, and everybody else. I have not been able to attend those meetings because of my activity on the front line. There are 2 members here of the front line. Let me see you. And talk about singing. Oscar came to the front line one time, and I wasn't there. And I came back, and there was Oscar with a choir. He had the women singing and praying. Yes. And when I listened to you, Oscar was just being Oscar. And I'm so grateful to be a friend. He was my mentor. And more recently, I cry almost every day because people are now seeing my frustration. And when he was here, he was the only one who would see that frustration. And by the time I was finished, I was ready to take the other step. Nonetheless, his legacy will live on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any response, Reverend Perrin? Any response? Or
I think just thanking you for sharing what you've been sharing. I'm thinking of what I said about liberation theology in a way which I probably could elaborate on more. In that he wasn't just looking at the Latin American sort of form of theology cloaked in Marxism. He was looking at the people's liberation of theology itself, the people, the folks, the people in the villages and the simple people. He thought that we had to liberate theology itself. And that's something that I think we could pursue in the future. How would Oscar have gone about liberating theology? This is what he was trying to do at UTC. And that when that happens, then liberation truly will come. Emancipation will come.
okay. Doc, go right ahead.
Thank you, Reverend Perrin, for this very enlightening conversation. My question is, do you think if Oscar had been allowed to remain within the church in an official sense, that he would have made the same impact that he has as a, well, more or less regular person, even if he was a lay minister?
It's a very good question. I think he did make an impact even when he came back, and he was still in the church, but he wasn't an ordained minister. I think I'm very uncertain about the answer to that, because sometimes Oscar probably would not have been strangled by the church. I think he couldn't be strangled by the church. And in that sense, I think he would have made great impact. He would break out some of the structures that are binding us. Hence, I want us to go back and study the vision that the Third Caribbean has put out, because Oscar he sort of embraced what they were trying to do. But I think he felt that there were some shortcomings. Maybe because the people themselves didn't take part as much as Oscar wanted them to have taken part in framing that whole vision. It is from the grassroots. I think that was probably the problem that he found. But I think he would have made a great impact even within the ordained ministry. But he wouldn't be the regular ordained ministry. He would have broken out, in a sense, broken the stranglehold on some of us ministers. Yeah.
Good night, everyone, and thank you very much, Professor, for what I think was very stimulating and, in a sense, very emotional, the presentation. And in fact, I thought I had known Oscar very well, but even some of those other traits at least has contributed to my broad understanding of the man. I happen to know Oscar for quite a while, but I'm going to ask you a question about his politics. But before I do that, I want to share something about Oscar that, in a sense, it comes true, but only indirectly. And I'm speaking about the generosity of the man. I think that was very crucial. And it's not just generosity about material things, because I don't think he had a lot of material things to share, but in terms of his knowledge.
Yeah.
And I know I'm one of those beneficiaries, because during my undergraduate studies, I remember I had chosen to do something on the National Youth Council. Many persons might not have known, but Oscar would have been one of those founding members of that organization. And I remember Oscar, Hugh Raggy, and Casper London, the late Casper London. They sat me down, and they just exposed the entire organization to me. But there was a period of time when I was in Trinidad, and I had decided to do, as part of Of course, in Women in History, I had decided to do a paper on Orlean Horn from the same village, and being in Trinidad, the technology was not as it is these days. So I had to communicate with persons home via telephone. Those of you who know Oscar would know that it was very difficult to communicate with Oscar via phone because Oscar didn't have a fixed line, so he had to leave a message by somebody. Oscar would then come to that person, and then you would get to communicate. What I remember well, and Oscar, Orlean was one of his people. Simeon is here, and I know Simeon was one of those persons I spoke to. But what I remember about Oscar and that part is that Oscar would present himself at the exact time that I had planned to call. So whenever I called, he was always there to give me that information. And I really, really appreciate that. Now, with regards to the question, Oscar in the 1970s was very much part of the, let us say, the socialist movement, the local socialist movement, okay? And he actually contested the elections on a socialist ticket, if we could put it that way. So, after listening to all that you have said about Oscar, I want to ask whether or not you think that Oscar, being the person he is, would have been able to function within that kind of socialist framework in terms of his political philosophy. Yes.
I think Oscar, he would function, but he would change it. In other words, he was always a guy who could not be really put in prison holes. I remember on the campus, for example, when everybody was talking about Marxism and so on, he was not so hot as a Marxist. He was more a Mao Zedong China person because he felt that that was more of a people's movement than what became of the Russian socialist experiment. And I think if he did join the Socialist Party, he wouldn't become sort of restricted by the doctrinaire socialism. Because I think he normally would have found, he was a humanist. And that was mostly, I think, what was driving his whole thing. So even within the socialist movement, he found that there could have been improvements. And he would have improved, the structure of everything within socialism itself.
The microphone, please.
You have to use a mic for them to hear you.
Yeah.
You have to use a mic.
The same year Oscar died, Prime Minister Gonsalve had come to the Emancipation Rally up in Diamond. I think you were there too. And he, on the side, asked me the same question. If Oscar had gotten political power, was in power, was he able to stick it? I thought long and hard, and I considered what is happening in politics, and I said to the Prime Minister, no. Maybe I was wrong, but I honestly don't believe Oscar would have been able to survive in this political atmosphere. I don't believe.
Well, what happened, I could say that he was a very simple but profound person. In other words, he would not be involved in intrigues and that type of thing. He's not the kind of person. What you see, what you get when it comes to Oscar. He was as straight as an arrow. And that doesn't work all the time in politics, especially modern day politics. But you need that to actually to keep people on their toes, keep politicians on their toes. He was always the voice of the people. And I think if he found the people were not, their interests were not being served, he would be the first to cry out.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, I want to say pleasant good night. I have known, as you say, Oscar, Brother A, for all of my life. And, I want to tell you, you have done a great job as somebody said, emotional, and it was really time, you know the man. Yes, I want to say, we're talking about the humility part of him. And the thing that I want to point out most of all, he knew the Lord. And that is the most thing upon this earth. But as we was talking about in the ministry, in these days, as brother, if many leaders are here, and even pastors and who is listening, if they could take a leave out of this book for the humility pass. Many ministers, many bishops, we have to go up with, we only hear the name. They don't sit, they don't talk with us, even in the local church. The pastors and the leaders, they are so up there. We have to climb the ladder to reach them. But he was so humble along there that we could have sit and talk with him. And if many leaders today could take a picture out of his book, because this is what God needs, humility. And we don't see it in our churches. Our leaders, they speak to us on Sunday morning, they have their Bible study, and that is there. Maybe you have a problem, you don't have nobody's shirt, because they are not your reach, they are too up there. And I really want to thank God for him. And somebody said, I was fortunate to be on the hospital the day before he died. And by the time I enter in, he said, Beverlyan, I want you to do the closing prayer. And some people was there, and they were saying, why closing prayer? And they was telling me, don't do the closing prayer. But I did the closing prayer. I asked God to help him not to cross Jordan alone and to stand with him. And when I was leaving in the evening, me and Auntie Kate, I said, I'm leaving. He said, come, you have to do the dismissal prayer. Yeah. And I so fortunate, I did the dismissal prayer. He was a man. I remember in my early Christian life, preaching sermon, he was my mentor. He told me, even though I didn't go to Bible school as yet, but he taught me how to preach the word. And I really want to thank God for a man like him. And I say it and I repeat myself again. I wish our leaders, because God is counting on you, and I wish who are hearing here and anywhere should come down, that our people can meet them some more. Thank you.
That's what Jesus did, and as I said, I think his role model was Jesus. If you look at it carefully, even though you had these political sort of experiments, his role model was Jesus, and he was clear about that. Yeah, he's a prophet.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and a pleasant night to everyone, and a special one to our dear Reverend. I want to contextualize what I'm going to say around my personal experiences with Brother A. And I must commend you for doing an excellent work, and for, in your presentation, connecting many dots that a lot of us did not even know that they existed. The point I want to mention about Brother A, I got to meet him around the period 1987-88. That's when I really understood what was going on in my community. I was around the age of 7, 8. But Brother A had a special gift where he was able to communicate and conversate without using words. Yeah. And I haven't heard anybody mention it, but once Brother A was in a room, his look, his smile, his physical movements gave a special energy, and that brought out significant leadership qualities in him, even before he started to speak. And that is something that we really have to say, that it signified significantly who Brother A was. I am from a Pentecostal upbringing, and I was born in the village of Diamonds, but I migrated out of the village of Diamonds at a very young age to a neighboring community called Sanssouci. Therefore, the issues that you touched on about the role in the Methodist Church, I did not really grow up knowing that side of Brother A. The Brother A who I knew was a man who appreciated history, understood that his community was emerging as a peasant community, and wanted to create an identity for that community to be a global force to be reckoned with. And socialism was one of the vehicles that he saw as one of the means of creating that identity and that expression. I want to say to the young persons who are here that something that resonates a lot is that he wasn't fearful, and as Simeon Green said, to be misunderstood by the status quo. And today, there are some persons who have that fear, not because there is a repressive apparatus at work, but there are certain personal characteristics in some persons where that fear is coming out. And I really want to encourage persons that you don't have to be fearful to question the status quo. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would say in response to that, if you remember when, as I said, Oscar was a man who thought Jesus was his role model. He didn't have to be fearful because he didn't have anything to lose. He wasn't a man who grabbed onto anything material. So he was among the poor, and he wanted to see himself as a poor person. So, he could do what he did because he had nothing to, nothing to defend, no status and all that type of thing, and class positions. And so that's one of the things that I think, if you look at how Jesus operated and what he told the rich young ruler to do and all that, you see Oscar there.
Okay, any more questions? We'll take a few more. We are still alive. We have a few more minutes. So put it on, please.
Hello.
Yeah. Yes.
I want to do an Oscar Allen here. Reverend Perrin, I do not wish for you to leave this place, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and believe that people are fearful not because of repression. It is not so. I will speak to you after this. There is a fear hovering over us, and people cannot speak. So I do not want you to go. Oscar will not allow this to get away.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Put it on, please. It just, yeah.
If the light is on, it's on. Yeah.
Yes, just speak straight into it, she says.
Yeah.
Greetings.
Greetings.
Cheryl Johnson is my name. I'm a friend of many people in this place, but more so, I was a dear friend of Oscar. Oscar, and you heard Maureen, what she said. So all those sentiments I share. If you had an assignment and you figured that you could go and ask Oscar to help you do it, you better do it yourself. Because when he was done with you, he sit you down. You have to explain it. And while you're explaining it, you're understanding it. And he said, go do it. So you ain't going to get no. As a matter of fact, Tigi, who sung up there with us, she said at the rally that one time she went with her passport form to ask Brother A to help her. He said, sit down, get the pen and paper, and ask her the questions that there. And she said, so he asked, so what for there? She said, that. He said, well, put it in.
All right.
At the end of that, she was able to do her own form and several forms for people.
That's a teacher.
I remember as a young woman, I was born in Diamond, but I don't know my life there. But I grew up in Mount Grenadines from around 2 years. And I remember that I journeyed every time there was an activity, he can attest to that, I am in diamonds in all the activities. When it's in the boxing plan, you remember, we used to meet there. And sometimes I am in that session and I want to ask a question, but I was so nervous. I could never forget the first time I stood and asked a question. I trembled. I said the question over and another way. And he calmed me and said, it's okay, we go answer it now. No, you know, Oscar talked about people. If you know, the PMC people. All the time, everything, and we were talking about that the other day, Simeon and us, about his love for the people. Even when we were doing food, it was the inner man center, inner man center. Everything, we, the people. And I want to remember, somebody asked about his politics, if he would have been able to make it. I think he might have changed the face of politics.
He would.
I think he would have made it. He's not a quitter. He's not a quitter. People around him quit, but he didn't quit. I remember several years ago, I was asked to mobilize for Emancipation Day rallies because we used to have a series of rallies in different communities. So I had to do the one in Mount Grenadines. And they gave me the task. Who knew that I would still be cooking for a living today? They gave me the task of cooking rice, and the container that I had to cook it in was a biscuit pan. You know, as soon as you heat that, it burn up. And then I had to curry a goat. Well, the goat was marvelous, but the rice was so burned that about 10 minutes in the process, I had to throw out the rice, clean out the thing, and put it back in the same pot to cook. So when we carry it, but as a matter of fact, I am not even sure how that eating go, because it was that time when they throw the bomb. You remember? When they were at Connery and everybody dispersed, so I don't even know how that food go. So I was in those times. That is why I know these songs. And that is why today I didn't want to say anything, but I thought that I needed to add a little bit of me to it. And I am young. Now, in my mind, I am thinking about all the things that Oscar taught us, and Maureen said some of it. And just for teacher there who spoke a while ago, yes, you. Erlene Horn actually was the niece of Oscar Allen, just in case, for information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Brother Cornelius, and then we have another person here. Brother Dennis Dunn.
Pleasant good night.
Good evening.
I just want to talk to you in context of a phrase that we hear so often, the unsung heroes. We hear about it all the time, unsung heroes. What does it mean? The persons among us who many of us may not know, who would have made valuable contribution. For example, in my community, I was born in Chumaka. You have Nurse Providence, who I think delivered almost every single soul in Chumaka from the 1950s right up until her back went bent. And she's an unsung hero. She delivered doctors, lawyers, you name it. They never sung. And tonight I just want to speak in context of that. I listened to you, Reverend Perrins, and it took me back to the 60s and the 70s in Jamaica, and I see right beside you, Oscar. It's a man I only met briefly. I've been with the Ministry of Agriculture for 33 years. Hardly ever met him, but I've worked within communities, including Diamond, where his presence made a tremendous impact. If you go to Diamond today and you ask, what's your name? Aluka. What's your name? Mugulugu. Where did you get your name? Oscar Nehemi. So there's that impact. The question is, in context of unsung hero, how many unsung heroes are there in St. Vincent? And how much longer would we continue to allow our unsung heroes to go unsung? That's the challenge. And in context of this presentation tonight, I think it sets a valuable platform for the upliftment and the development of our heroes. And so that the ones who have never heard a song coming from these heroes will hear it, the young ones, the future generation, the foundation builders, the pillars of our society. And the charge tonight on our senior leaders within this room and within St. Vincent to find a way, to find that way, to filter this information down so we could emulate our heroes, we could bring out the better qualities in them, in ourselves as leaders, to make our nation a better place. I thank you for your presentation, and next year we're going to invite you back as a special guest. Thank you.
For that. But I think one of the books that Oscar read was Grounding with My Brothers by Walter Rodney. Made a very good, you have to learn to ground with people, be on their level, and, Paul again said to be all things to all people. So that's what Oscar was masterful at doing. He could communicate at all levels, children. And that's what we have to learn to do all over again. Yeah.
Good night.
Yeah.
And thank you, Reverend, for a really stimulating lecture.
Thank you.
I want to ask a few questions though. One of the legacy of Oscar, the Oscar that I know, and from the community of Diamond Village, that one of the things that he have struggled against was the dehumanizing of black people, especially our females. And today, we see it getting worse in terms of the songs that the females are dancing and whining to. We see it getting worse in terms of the bleaching, that no longer is black beautiful, but now persons want to be of another color.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
We see it expressing itself in the church, as the sister said earlier, that instead of love, instead of liberating of the spirit and the mind and taking care of the physical and social needs of the poor, we see now that the religious leaders of today is more about self-aggrandizement of themselves, getting more about wealth, more about getting bigger planes and bigger houses and everything, and that somebody like Oscar, whose legacy was that he never wants to be a millionaire, because he has within him the intellectual capacity to have earn $1 million or more, or a couple of $1 million if you choose to go that path.
Yeah.
He chose a path to work with the poor. But today we're seeing that so many persons are not involved in those type of work. I mean, in our country today we have more graduates than we ever had in any period in the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But we no longer find the graduates in the community walking along the poor, trying to liberate people. It's more about see how fat their bank account can come. How can we change and make the legacy of Oscar Allen a living legacy in today's world?
And that's a challenge. That's a challenge. Thank you for that. I think I ended on that note in a sense. I use the word praxis because that's what I think is the challenge we have. We have to find a way to take this thing out of rhetoric, as Oscar did, and institute what we are saying we want to do. And for example, the graduates you mentioned, how many of them are volunteering in community development, helping the tutoring people as Oscar did? And that's what we need to do, get us back into the communities and reinvest in the communities.
Good night. I'm from Diamonds. I grew up somewhat when Oscar came in Diamonds for the first time. And we looked at him as this young guy. They referred to him, oh, that's Alan Crazy Boy. Many people won't know that. Oscar have left a legacy with us. Many of us will die and leave a name, but he left with us a legacy that will live on. The Oscar I knew...
Speak into the mic, please. We're still on air.
Yeah, yes. The Oscar I knew is one who molded me to be who I am today. He was a cushion. Like Cheryl said, you go to him with your homework, he said, girl, sit down there. Start reading and answer your question yourself. He'll help you. I was a curious little girl. I remember Simeon, Adrian Fraser, Oscar, and many others in his his house talking. and I will go in the window and peep and listen because I was very curious. He encouraged me, he molded me, he mentored me like many others. And because of Oscar and my bringing up, I have learned that we are here to serve each other and one another. I got it from him, besides my parents. I went away very early in my days, and I remember Oscar, before I left St. Vincent, he'll tell me, all we are one. You could be anything that you want to be. You know, you don't have to be rich, but you could be anything that you want to do. And he'll ask me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I say, I want to be a lawyer. And he encouraged me that you don't have to have money to be a lawyer. But I didn't take that route because I don't believe that's the path that was made for me. And as I grew, I left St. Vincent, but St. Vincent never left me. And my mother passed in 2010, and I decided to give back to the community when I heard Soboto's mother was in the church standing, and she was saying how great my mother was and how much she gave to the society. A woman of 10 children, not very educated. I'm the first of 10. And I said to myself, if my mother could have done what she did, what am I doing for society?
Right.
So I decided, and it's all a part of the community, Oscar, my parents, that you look back and you say, what are you doing to help your fellow men? And Oscar teach that a lot. You know, he talk about that a lot. Always help, always assist. And out of nowhere in the church, I announced that I believe in education. And Oscar taught about get yourself educated, be upright. And I said to myself, since I believe in education, I just out of nowhere announced that every child in Diamond School will get a backpack with school supply that day when I go back to America. My siblings said to me, you think you're rich? Where you going to get money from? You know, but I did it. And when I did it, my community of Diamonds was so appreciative. I walked through that school and I heard a little child say, Miss, my mommy not bring money for buy book back for me or not. God bless you. You know. And Oscar and I sat, and like I always do when I visit home, and he said, why you want to do this? I said, you make me do it. You know. He said, girl, you sure? Me say, yeah. I said, brother A, there is not one day in my life when I walk the street of Philadelphia, when I have the rough days, that I never forget you encouraging me. You know, those things stick with you forever. Mm-hmm. That's why I say Oscar have left a legacy behind.
Right.
And every time what I did that year happened to turn out to be an organization that I formed a couple of years after. And we've been serving the community. And the first thing I land in Philadelphia, land in St. Vincent, I'll call Oscar. Oscar, boy, I'm here. I need a ride. I can't drive these places. You have to carry me there and everywhere. So he'll follow me to deliver these book bags. And one year he said, how come you only a South country, you not go nowhere else? I said to him, I only know people in the country. He said, girl, you have to serve everybody with you. you know? So one year he said to me, just before he passed, 2 years ago, he said, you know Leeward? Me say, yeah. How about Barley? You ever think about Barley? Me say, Oscar, no. I ain't finished Lowman's yet. I ain't finished Chapman's yet, you know. And so this year, I come here every year and I pick primary school that we serve. Yeah. Because we're here to serve each other, love one another, and do the best we can to make mankind better. Because serving is what we're here to do regardless of what you think. And we must have love, and if you have love, you will serve. Okay? So this year, in Oscar's name, I found Barley.
Oh, hallelujah. I'm sure he's smiling.
And the 2 primary school in Barley, our organization, Giving Life a New Meaning, will be serving. Each child in each primary school will get a backpack with school supplies in Oscar's name and his honor.
Amen.
Thank you.
You know, so that is how Oscar impacted my life. You know, I never knew I'll be doing service to people, but I actually turned out to be doing service to people, and I love it very much thanks to Oscar.
Thank you. We have time for about 2 more, and then we will close off this evening's proceedings.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
This John C. Maxwell quote says, "A leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way." If we listen to everybody who spoke tonight, we would realize that they said that Mr. Allen, as a leader, taught them to be caring and selfless. He was my mentor. I spent the latter part of his years. I was his good friend. He mentored me. Because of him, I actually matured into this person that I am today. I think maybe if I didn't know him, I probably wouldn't have come up here to say anything. But I just want to say that he was a really, really generous guy. He spotted me. He had this thing about spotting persons. I don't know how he do it, but he spotted me when I was pregnant and I got back my CXC results. He was like, what are you doing pregnant and you're so intelligent? And from there, he took me under his wings. He took care of my daughter like his own. He was the father I never had. And I just want us to really remember the work that he did. And I don't want us to just have these lectures. I want us to publish those works so that other people can learn about him, our young children. And I really think that, I don't know, maybe we can get our local history taught in primary school or something like that. I'd really love to see that initiative taken. Good night.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any final comments or questions?
I just want to say this,
Quickly, Kwame.
Throughout war history, when you have a just cause, Mandela, we in the Black Power days, faith is a hindrance to progress. As long as you have a just cause, faith can't stop you. It's only if you're in yourself, you're struggling for yourself, faith will hold you back. But as long as you have a cause for the people and a cause for the future, faith could never stop you. Okay?
Thank you. All right, I think we could wrap up this evening. And it's my distinct pleasure to say thanks to you for your comments and your questions. This conversation continues, and among many other things that we have planned, and other persons are doing things at home and abroad. And so you'll be hearing from us. It's now my pleasure to invite Sir Errol Allen to bring us some end notes, and then we will close the session with some light refreshments in the downstairs of this compound.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being so generous. The night is fast spent, and you've still allowed me to bring these end notes. I call them end notes because I want you to understand a little bit more about the man Oscar Allen from my vantage point. Now, we have shared with you in this program a prayer before surgery, which Oscar circulated among the close family. You should read it carefully. This is the nature of the man. And when I saw it, I really was moved, you know. That's the first. You will have heard that during his studies at UWI, UTC, he went to Haiti
for a sabbatical period. After a brief period of orientation into the language, he began to conduct services in the lingo and to interact effectively in the language of the masses. They exuded great warmth to this new man, and they were surprised that he was able to master the language in such short a time. Little did they know that he did have some background in French as he taught in the secondary school. Now, you heard a lot more about Haiti, and so I leave that snippet to the next one. In recent times, there has been a debate regarding the names that have been associated with our colonial past. And while we cannot extinguish unsavory elements of our history, there are creative ways in which we can positively impact the minds of contemporary generations. In the 1970s and 80s, Oscar's way of instilling Black consciousness and pride was to introduce African names with their meanings to households whose babies were being christened in that community. And it is with great pride that the Diamond community embraced the concept in their naming of the Earlene Horn Square in honor of an impactful personality who emerged from the area. My third snippet is Oscar was always reflective and in deep thought. And one day, shortly after the formal opening of French's house here, we were in conversation about our past. And as we discussed activities which will take place in these premises, he floated the idea, how about calling it Pauline Allen Resource Complex? I gladly agreed, because I knew what she meant to Oscar and I and our other siblings. So you would see the name on this building, Pauline Allen Resource Complex, and that is some work done by Dinks at the bottom there, for those of you who would not have known her. Finally, my final footnote. As Oscar returned from Jamaica and took up residence in Diamond Village, where our father was born, he was to bring to our knowledge, certainly to my knowledge, close family members and their siblings, of whom many of us were unaware. And during our visits to Diamond, during our youthful days, we were unaware of that. This is how discrete societies operated in those days. Today, we are different. And as a result of Oscar, we are a better integrated family today. I say no. I speak philosophically, and so those of you who know and understand, I think Cheryl said something recently, and so I say no more. Now, Oscar, many things I've heard this evening were new to me. Sometimes Oscar and I will be conversing, and when you reach a very sensitive point, he would move away. You know, it was typical. But this is the Oscar I know. I remember during the funeral, Burns Bonady made a speech which resonated very well with me, because this lady, Pauline Allen Young, took 6 of her younger brothers and sisters in a home, well, the family home. And that was not enough. There was a goddaughter from Grenada who came to live with us, because her mother felt that she was growing up into a tomboy, and she knew that Pauline Allen Young was a strict person. So she came. And then Burns reminded me, which I had forgotten, that there was a time when his mother went abroad to do some studies, and his mother left the two children, Burns and Verona, with this lady. So you see, our household was growing larger and larger. And Burns said that Oscar himself and I slept on the same bed, because you could, as the Jamaicans say, you can small up yourself. So that is an idea of the man, and I wanted you to understand some aspects. But that is about all I can say at this stage, because the night is quite old, and we are here for a long time. Thanks very much.
Just a word of thanks, and to let you know that my 4 children, my first girl is Aisha Rochelle, second one is Ayana Shola, my third is a boy is Ayodeji Kamu, and the fourth is a boy is Ajani Sekou. And you might ask where I got those names from. Thank you.
Sisters and brothers, let me say a warm thank you to you for coming out. It has been an inspiring night, an emotional night. This is a journey that we have started, and we will continue. But I just want to say a special thank you to our sponsors tonight, and we were overwhelmed in such a short space of time. And if you notice, they are all indigenous financial institutions. And so we want to say on behalf of the Friends of Oscar and the Open Campus, thanks to our sponsors, the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, GECU, Teachers Cooperative Credit Union, the Kingston Cooperative Credit Union. Please give them a round of applause, because this and if this is just the beginning, we anticipate that it will get better. But we must also say thank you to those persons who made the evening a pleasurable and wonderful one. To Rodney, the pan boss, we say thank you very much for his musical delights, for playing the national anthem and the musical prelude earlier. Of course, the piece by Bob Marley. We thank Rodney very much for her introductory remarks. Safia, we thank you very much. Safia is part of the organizing committee as well. And for the citation, Brother Simeon, we thank you. And of course, the Cheryl, Tigi, and Simeon for their medley. We promise you we'll do it better next time, or even grander, with a musical accompaniment. I wish to say thanks to Celine for planting a thought about this Reverend Perrin. When I saw the article last year in the Vincentian, I was taken aback, and I know this man had to have some insight into the person and persona of Oscar Allen. And so when we were searching around, several names came in our heads. In fact, we should confess that Simeon was the person we chose, and he had agreed, but he wisely said to us, let's bring somebody inside, from outside who know and studied and know Oscar well. And we did. And Celine, when we were hunting around, gave us, or reminded us, that Reverend Perrin might have been the best person, and we didn't look back. And so, Celine, we want to thank you for that. Cyril, we thank you very much for those closing thoughts. But of course, the night belongs to Reverend Perrin. We want to thank you very much for agreeing almost immediately, for coming, and for taking a couple days out of your holiday. And we thank you very much for a very inspiring start to this, what we anticipate will be a yearly activity on the UE's calendar and also nationally. And do know that you are in our prayers and our thoughts, and that we will always treasure this very inspirational moment that you've shared with us. Thank you very much. We want to say thanks to Sipney Hall as well. He didn't attend the meetings, but he's a part of the extended committee, and Ingrid and the others, Lucette and Cecil, Ryan, Reverend Cerna, they're part of the initial Friends of Oscar who met last year. We thank you very much. But I also want to say thanks to the Searchlight newspaper, the newspaper, the Vincentian, and Quizzy Allen. My colleague, head of the Open Campus, got an interesting email of somebody wanting to contribute, a young man who has a small business, and we said he would like to do the artwork, and immediately we sent the program, and he did a wonderful job. So this artwork that you see here, it's simple, but it's quite neat and nice. We want to say thanks to Quizzy Allen. Is he here? No? Okay, thank you very much, Quizzy Allen. And of course, we want to say thanks to CAP as usual. They've been partnering with us over the years. Certainly Nice Radio, Dougie and his crew, Monty in particular, the technician, we thank you very much. And for all of you who have come from Diamonds, a bus full, and from other places, the family, the Cummins, the Allens, Aloma, and those who are listening and viewing online, we thank you for joining us. Friends and family of Oscar Allen and all those who are listening, we thank you very much. This has been a wonderful evening. It's something that we anticipate will get bigger, and we want to thank you very much, our audience here, for your questions and your comments. And hope I didn't forget anyone. But thank you all, and have a wonderful evening, and continue to bounce the ideas to the Open Campus and to the Friends of Oscar. As you notice, we have quite a lot of work to do, and we depend on you for support and for the ideas as well, to build this legacy that the sister talked about. Thank you very much, and God bless you.